Of course, this paper was laid on the table at our previous council meeting due to some additional information being received at the meeting. And I understand that Councillor Taylor actually would like to open the discussion on this.
Well, actually, Your Worship, I was actually going to move the motion rather than open the discussion. But if you want to have discussion previous, that's fine. I'll wait to move the motion after that.
I'm happy for you to move the motion and then provide the context around what's happened over the last couple of weeks.
Okay, so I'm happy to move the recommendation, which is approve going to tender for the demolition of the council civic administration building in 2020 and ring fence the associated cost of demolition to be recovered from the future use of the site either through a sale or a long-term lease. And the reason that I'm happy to go straight into recommending it is that, as Your Worship has already mentioned, this paper was presented 2 weeks ago and we received some submissions in relation to it. The councillors have, over the last 2 weeks, had significant opportunity to investigate and speak with numerous consultants, read a plethora of reports that have been provided over the last 8 years, and have had the opportunity to really consider this whole issue. And as a result of that, we've reviewed that, and I believe that we're now in a position to move forward. And this, although much of the discussion has been centred around seismic assessments, I think it's also very important to remember that this is not just about a seismic report. There was a very comprehensive document about site optimisation and a business case done. And so we should also be cognisant of the fact that in doing this and passing this recommendation, we can move forward to revitalise a part of the city and the CBD that over the last 2 years, as has been described to us, has started to become a ghost town. And so for the people in that area, we have now got an opportunity to go forward, and attachment 3, the diagram in our papers, which shows the possible sale of the site, the development of a hotel, the re-establishment of the library, and a connection between that civic site and the CBD through Civic Court is a huge opportunity for the city to revitalise that area. And we should focus on that as well as the information that we've received over the last 2 weeks. It has been thorough. We've had ample opportunity to ask questions, read reports, and come to a decision. And as a result of that, I'm happy to be the mover of this resolution, that we now move forward in a progressive way.
Councillor Crown, were you indicating you'd like to second that?
Correct.
Thank you.
I am.
Would you like to talk to it now? Or
Yes,
at the
I would,
end?
thank you. So I'd just like to start off by thanking the staff for making the additional information available to us over the last 2 weeks. Especially as a new councillor, it was great to have that background history, and your willingness to just provide us with things as we requested was fantastic. It makes the process far quicker. So I also just wanted to touch on the fact that the statement of proposal was received in 2017. So for me, timing is an issue too. I'm really excited that we're looking to move this resolution today, and that we can get on with, especially around that revitalisation stuff that Councillor Taylor has raised too. Looking forward to seeing this end of town come back to life. There's lots of potential. The hotel, I suppose, is one of those options in front of us, or one of those potential activities to come out of it. But it's just great to see that we are going to move forward, hopefully, and draw a line under this and get moving so that we can utilise an asset and utilise the land that's there in order to benefit the entire city. The other thing that I wanted to say was that the paper that was provided to us was really thorough. The tender process was well laid out to us, and that from my perspective, I'm really confident in the due diligence that us as a council has completed in regards to this. So that's why I'm speaking in favour of the resolution.
Thank you. Councillor Tupney.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. So, acknowledging the points which have already been expressed by other councillors, especially around the time frame and the level of information that we've been provided with, I fully support the comments that have come from the mover and seconder. I just would like to take the opportunity to acknowledge again the staff and the information that they provided to us. For myself, the seismic assessments were a key indicator or a key mitigating factor in the decisions to support change around the optimisation of that site. I appreciate that Graham Robertson's 5 minutes with council at our last meeting brought to the table some questions that he had around particular parts of the reports and the differences between those reports. There were some concerns that I shared around confusion in that space, and again acknowledged the fast turnaround time in which staff were able to provision an opportunity for us to meet with Strata and Eurocon yesterday. As a result of that engagement with them yesterday and the number of questions that we asked, I walked away from that meeting with good confidence in understanding the difference between the reports that were provided, the progress in which our staff went through in bringing that information to council, and why those two differences were there, and that both reports have validity and mana in their own right. So I just wanted to acknowledge the opportunity to clarify those things for myself yesterday. I'm now sitting in a position where I have good confidence in both reports and understand the difference between the two. And as was reiterated and encouraged to us by Graham Robinson in the last meeting, it's about making the right decisions for the right reasons. And as a result of the queries he's brought to this table and the opportunity to re-engage with Strata and Eurocon, I'm very pleased that I'm in a position of good confidence to continue to support our optimisation strategy for the civic area. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Tupney. And one of the questions that I had put to staff after the last meeting was to bring back to us the information around a cost estimate for a full refurbishment of the library and civic building. And that cost estimate that was given to us in August of 2017 and prepared by quantity surveyors Ryder, Levitt, Bucknell was 75 million to actually do that refurbishment project. So that, of course, as well as part of the consideration here in terms of how we proceed forward. Councillor Brown.
I'd also like to speak in favour of the motion. The primary reason I consider that we're demolishing this building is that it's surplus to our requirements. So with the advancements of technology and the modern way that we're working, we can now house the council staff within 3,500 square metres instead of 11,000 square metres. So well done to Adele and her team. That's a huge savings for us, and that makes this building now surplus to our requirements. And most of everything else I'd sort of prepped has been said. I'm really excited that this will revitalise the city. The strengthening work, as you said, is going to cost a significant amount of money. One of the points that Graham Robinson also raised at the last meeting was around safety for passers-by, and I just wanted to clear that up, that I've spoken to our team and that we have checked that with our building manager, and he's assured us that we've done the risk assessments and we're doing everything that's necessary to keep the public safe in that. And having looked through the documentation, I'm comfortable that Strata have provided a reputable seismic report that reflects the real picture of what our building is at.
There's no further.
Just
Councillor
one
Price.
quick comment. I think that we should all congratulate ourselves on the process we've gone through this to put all councillors in a position where they can make a decision quite clearly and no turf unturned. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Mawson.
I'd just like to add to that, just commending the staff. They've been very forthcoming with the information, and certainly being a new councillor, and unaware of the all the reports and so forth. There's been a lot of information, and it's been brilliant, the whole process. Good.
Thank you. I will therefore put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Agenda item 4, curbside recycling crate replacement policy. Invite Cameron to come and fill us in.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, Councillors, ladies and gentlemen. For those watching at home, for members of the public, my name's Cameron Burton. I'm the Manager of Environmental Solutions for the Council and manage the environmental and waste management functions of Council. Agenda item 4 today to Council today seeks Council's approval associated with the service delivery of providing our curbside recycling service for establishing an ability to charge for replacement recycling crates. We managed to deliver close to 75,000 crates to each eligible property over the month of October for the 1st of November start date of the new contract. Subsequent to that delivery, some crates have been stolen, lost or damaged, and Council needs to seek payment for replacement crates. There are 2 reasons for this. One is that it's unfair for ratepayers who look after their council-owned crates to effectively bear the cost of the purchased crates damaged by others. 2, if there is a free availability of crates without cost, the cost to council of replacing those could get out of hand. It also incentivises less care of council property by handing them out freely and reduces the effectiveness of waste minimisation if we're handing out additional plastic crates without payment. We are seeing about 20 crates seem to be requiring replacement per week at the moment. So the cost associated with that is about $10,000 to $15,000 per annum. And to offset that, we seek today that Council approves an addition to the fees and charges as a cost of $15 per replacement crate to cover the cost of the crate production, the freight to us, the database administration, the waterproof stickers and delivery of those crates, although other options are available which are mentioned in the paper and I would encourage discussion on.
Thank you, Kim. Councillor Price.
Can you tell us where they're going missing?
I have found one, and
Trend or
I have
anything?
found one in Haumoana that I've grabbed off the side of the street on their curbside recycling day. There are others, when people move house, they are using them as a very handy receptacle to move their things and they're not taking them back. Some have been reversed over by occupants of properties, so there's multiple reasons why they disappear.
No trend that we can get onto?
No trend at this stage. Apart from there was one area of town where all of the paper crates disappeared. So there was an area of a neighbourhood where solely the paper crates disappeared after we knew that they had been delivered to all of those addresses. So there's something a wee bit fruity going on in that neck of the woods.
Councillor Mawson.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just wondering, were you able to return that poor lost crate back to its owner?
I was indeed, yes.
Thank
you.
Through you, Madam Chair, was this issue not foreseen when you made the change?
Yes, absolutely, but the fees and charges have to be set at a particular time each year, so we didn't have that opportunity at the time.
Councillor Crystal.
You, Madam Mayor. What about when the recycler people break the crate?
Yeah, there's a reasonableness factor there as well. So if they do break them in the duty of their jobs, then they are to report those to us and we'll replace them free of charge and blacklist that unique number.
Okay, yeah, because I can imagine that happening. People will say whether it's true or not, but if the recycler's saying that, then
Yes, yeah. The new methodology that we're using reduces the risk of that because they're literally lifting them from the curb to about that level rather than up into a truck and being placed back down onto the curb from there.
Councillor Bogan and Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Well, it does sort of concern me that areas that are possibly more prone to losing crates are often people who are unable to afford to replace them. But anyway, that's just a statement. But in terms of other municipalities who use crates, as many do, is this standard practice, and does it work? That's what I want to know. Does it work? I mean, I've found with my own that I often only fill up like one, and I go down to my neighbours and I add a couple of bottles or a couple of plastic bits to theirs, because it's not worth me taking out a great big crate with only a couple of things in it. But in terms of other municipalities, has this been effective in replacing crates?
Yes, it
charging
has.
people?
Yes, and we've sought a reasonable charge. So there is obviously an expense to produce the crates and those other points that I raised. That will have to be reviewed year on year, and the fees and charges allows us to do that, and that is due to the additional admin and that sort of thing that goes on, but also the number of crates, the actual order. We have to order in the thousands rather than one at a time. If we ordered one at a time, they'd be very expensive each, so we have to foresee and forecast what's going ahead there. In relation to the cost in other municipalities, Otahanga charged $20 per crate, Tasman charged $20.90 and then $27.70 to have it delivered. Horowhenua do the same, $17 a crate and $31.50 to have it delivered. So I think we're doing as well as we possibly can in those for the least price.
Councillor Brown, then Councillor McGrath.
Just on when people are moving house, I can see it might be an easy mistake for people to make to take the crate with them.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any sort of education plan around that, or?
Yes, and it's not as thorough as it could have been due to the speed at which we've rolled this out. That will be ongoing in the future, and as we've discussed previously, we hope to engage a bit more on a more frequent basis to educate around waste in general, as well as the key messages around how to do things operationally. So yes, there is an education philosophy going on in the background. There's also audits going on, so if they're moving to another place within Napier and all of a sudden the trucks arrive and there are 6 crates outside one address, we can quite quickly see where those originally came from and recover them. That's ongoing.
Just through the chair, when you say recover them, are the recyclers taking them away at the time?
As are we, yes.
And secondly, who holds the liability? I'm just thinking for Housing New Zealand tenants. If their crates go missing, who's responsible for replacing them? The tenant or Housing New Zealand, being the homeowner, I guess?
We would like the tenant to be responsible, but we have no control over that. We have had quite a few discussions with Housing New Zealand. They don't have a bond as a landlord. So in private tenancy situations, the owner could hold a bond and say, as part of the chattels, these crates should be left on this property. And if they're not, then they could take the cost of the crates out of that bond. Housing New Zealand don't have that ability. So we're in constant discussions with them to try and rectify that situation.
It's good that you've had the discussion. That was what I was after. Thank you.
Just flowing on from what you said earlier around multiple crates being put out at one place, where obviously every household's only given their 3. One of the risks I see with making it publicly available to purchase additional crates is that people use that as an opportunity to gain an additional crate where, say, they need it for the amount of recycling they're producing. So just wondering, bearing in mind we know that that's a risk and that'll be addressed curbside where we see it, but are you able to sort of tell us what would happen in the future? Is there some options around people being able to purchase an additional crate and obviously pay for the service higher on their rates, as an example, to account for additional recycling?
Through Madam Chair, at this point there is not that facility. It's a good question because it does come with the risk of people just wanting to go shopping for more crates, which is not what we're trying to create. So in the respect of damaged crates, we will uplift the damaged crate. Every crate has a unique code on it, and we know which property that was delivered to and what time and date. So that crate would then be removed from that register, and the new crate unique number would be assigned to that property instead. In relation to additional crates, should they say my crate has been stolen and they end up with 4 or more crates, the contractor will only pick up 3 at a time from each property. At this stage, there is no future desire to provide additional crates, which will provide additional capacity, which will provide additional costs to the ratepayer for the service.
And I think you covered off the second half of my question that I was going to ask is it feasible that our policy for giving additional crates only kicks in when they return the damaged one? In a situation with theft, like you mentioned, that's not possible. So
Correct.
A policy like that wouldn't be possible.
No, not that part of it, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Tapani.
This is more around, so I'm in favour of the report that that you've brought to council. I'm just seeking, have we seen at this stage, given that we're in the very initial stages of rolling this out and we're still really putting in place the mechanisms to service this, have we seen that we're aware of any significant or even minor changes in consumer output with regards to the wastes that are ending up in landfill? Are we starting to see a change in consumer behaviour too soon?
I think it's too soon, sorry, through you, Madam Chair, I think it's too soon to see that, but there are significant changes coming from central government in that respect that we have to consider. We have seen to date, for the first month of the process, we have seen an increased uptake in some particular recyclable items.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm quite happy to move the recommendation when you're ready for discussion to finish.
Yeah, is there any further questions from? No? Okay. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Crystal, very good. Did you wish to speak to the motion?
No, I think it's quite practical. Thank you, Cam, and I'm happy to support your recommendation. Madam Mayor.
The same.
Anyone else wish to speak to the motion? No? Therefore, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is actions from previous meetings, which I will actually take as read, but if there was anything specific that any councillors had, yes, Councillor Taylor?
I'd just like to report that I've spoken with Sport Hawke's Bay, and I believe they have corresponded with the governance team that there is no council appointment to Sport Hawke's Bay.
Haven't heard from them, but look.
Oh, well, I emailed somebody. They copied me in on it.
I'll follow up on that.
Thank you for that update. I would just like to speak to the action that came through from the Audit and Risk Committee regarding the War Memorial Centre and the financial risk of taking Napier Conference Centre off the building. As people will have noted, that action has actually been undertaken, so that particular action can come off the schedule. Okay. Yes, can I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Tapani, seconded by Councillor Crown. To receive the actions report. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And we now have reports from the Audit and Risk Committee held on the 5th of December, which I will just run through them, and then any that there's no questions or discussion on, we can move in bulk. So the reports include the Health and Safety Report, Risk Management Report for November 2019, the Audit and Risk Committee Charter, the proposed Audit and Risk Committee 2020 meeting calendar. The financial delegation we will discuss separately. Sensitive expenditure for Mayor and Chief Executive. External accountability, Audit New Zealand Management Report. And external accountability, investment and debt report. And the internal audit for community grants management. Do I have a mover and seconder to accept those reports? Thank you, Councillor Tapani, seconded by Councillor Bogue. Did anyone wish to speak to any of them specifically? Okay. Therefore, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. With regards to the financial delegation report, there was some discussion regarding the sit at the Audit and Risk Committee. The original recommendation was around an increase to the Chief Executive's delegation from 500,000 to 1 million. And after discussion, the amended recommendation that came through from the committee was that this was to come to council for a decision without a recommendation from the Audit and Risk Committee itself. In saying that, the independent members did indicate they supported the increase. And I had expressed concerns around an increase in the financial delegation with regards to some of the perception and distrust issues that some members of our community have at the moment around our processes, and I felt that it was inappropriate at this time to be making a change such as this. So just bringing this to the table for discussion. Councillor Crown.
My question through you, Madam Mayor, and I'm not quite sure who to, maybe Dal would be the right person to direct this to. How often is this reviewed? When would we have another opportunity to decide something like this? When would it come up in an agenda?
Through the Mayor, so this particular delegation hadn't been reviewed for at least 10 years. So we'd been requested to bring a paper to council. So we provided a new document which we haven't had that visibility around. So we thought it was an opportune time to review that delegation, and had considered other entities as a result, including Hastings District Council. But council can review, as the Mayor said, review that delegation at any point in time.
Thank you. Councillor Tapney, then Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. So I read that report, and I'm quite happy on the face of it to accept the recommendation from the panel, noting the concerns of the Mayor. I just would have liked to have seen a little bit more, the 10-year time frame in review. That's a significant factor that I think perhaps could have been expressed in here. But I would be looking for more detail. It's not about questioning the integrity of the panel. It's about ensuring that I can have full confidence in that recommendation. So if there was a little bit more comparative data around how often that has been a problem for any delegation provided to any staff member, and where the recommendation came from with regards to the, I'm assuming, a recognised trend that needed to be reviewed, and I just would like to have seen some of that in here to have better confidence in that. Statement more than a question.
Can I just ask a process clarification question, possibly through to governance? This is the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee. It is not a decision item for council today, is that correct?
I have sought clarification on this, and yeah, Debbie wouldn't mind just...
Happy to speak to it. Apologies. Navigating the desk kit. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so within the governance structure of council, the way it's currently set up, the hearings committee is the only committee that has decision-making rights on its own. The Audit and Risk Committee is still double debated. It has the strong advantage of the independent members, as is best practice nationally, but ultimately it still, as a committee, makes recommendations through to council.
So, sorry, just to clarify, are we making a decision based on this recommendation today?
So the recommendation wording that came out of the committee was a little bit tricky because they decided that they didn't want to make a very specific one. So following the discussions at the Audit and Risk Committee, they wanted it noted to Council, the original recommendation. They wanted it noted to Council that the independent members held a particular perspective and the Mayor was representing a different perspective, and then wanted to encourage that discussion at Council. And I'm hoping, there are 3 members here that were present for that, so I'm hoping that I've accurately represented their memory of that as well. So what it would mean is, following your discussion and debate today, that it would require a substitute motion or an amendment that would capture Council's position on this.
And just through the meeting, just to support what Debbie said, is that today is around making that decision around that, and the reason it went through Audit and Risk was to assess that risk around that delegation as well, and to provide Council with further information if required through that committee.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to tease this out, because my understanding, and historically this has been how it's worked, you pass the minutes of other committees. Are you saying this is like double debate, so we don't need a decision item on our agenda to come to a decision point on this,
That's
because
correct.
it's captured by double debate?
That's correct, and that's always been the case for this committee.
Got you. Thank you.
Councillor Price.
Just a question. So are you saying it was 500,000 10 years ago? What's inflation been?
Councillor Bode.
Yes, just another question through you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, this suggestion has come just not out of the air. Possibly there have been examples where it was a hindrance not to have this extra ability for the CE to spend $1 million. Have there been instances in the last few years when it has been a barrier?
Through the Mayor, so we actually had John Kingsford speak to the Audit and Risk Committee in relation to this. So what we're recognising is there's a, with effectively the value of the dollar changing over time, and that a lot of our contracts are changing in our values, that things need to represent, what's suitable for a decision that can be made by the Chief Executive versus a decision that needs to come through for a Council decision. We didn't have specific examples, we're just noting that the change over time and good practice would suggest that we need to review this, and in light, EIT have undergone a similar change to their delegation for their Chief Executive, and they've moved these to $1 million, and Hastings have moved these to $5 million.
So just continuing, so the kinds of things that this would be required would be for like infrastructure, decisions on infrastructure.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, it's a really good question. So it's only approving expenditure which is within your plan that has been approved. So anything which is outside of that plan would have to come to Council anyway. So all it's enabling to do is enabling Council officers to get on and deliver the work program in an efficient way.
Councillor McGrath, then Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Simpson.
Just through the chair, EIT was used as an example. How often do their governance team meet? Because there's options for Council to meet every second week just about to make decisions. How often does the EIT governance meet?
I can answer that.
It's being used as an example.
And I guess further to that, the current process is that anything over the delegation of 500,000 goes to the Hearings Committee, which can actually be called together at any time. Councillor Taylor.
So there's a couple of points that I'd like to raise. One is that the minutes note that the independents supported the recommendation. I supported the recommendation as well. And I support it on the basis that this is not about just today and the next year. As you can see, this delegation has been in place for 10 years. The next delegation could be in place for another 10 years. And so we have to look at the future and the access to making these decisions by any person who sits in the Chief Executive's role. We also, and the current Chief Executive alluded to it. You have budgets. Budgets are the system by which you manage your finances. If there are breaches or if there are over expenditure in areas, we will be notified by that because they will be actions outside what is budgeted for. So there is a network, or there is a process around any risk, and that's why the paper was taken to Audit and Risk. And the assessment by Audit and Risk, by our independents, was that this was appropriate, and I supported it.
As the other member of, or another member of the Audit and Risk Committee, I too supported the motion at the Audit and Risk Committee. I believe it's reasonable that that level of expenditure be increased, bearing in mind exactly what has been articulated. Effectively, all the Chief Executive is doing is approving specific items that have already been approved in our annual plans and budgets. So I don't have an issue with it, and neither did the independent advisors on the Audit and Risk Committee.
And to provide further clarification on my stand on this, this is with direct regard to process. This is with direct regard to our community demanding more open and transparent behaviour from us at the moment. And by having these financial decisions go through a hearing, which is minuted and available to the community, that we achieve that. So this was not about personalities or individuals. This was about recognising that our community is demanding a higher level of transparency from us. And that was the reason that I was not in support of the increase to the delegation.
Where are we at process-wise on this today? Have we got a...
Someone will need to put forward a substantive motion, which we will then vote on.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, can I ask a practical question around how the delegation is used, possibly to Adele? So if council has a budgeted item, say it's $2.1 million, usually most projects of that size have a number of different expenditures to reach that total amount that's budgeted. How is that managed? So, for instance, if we left the delegation at $500,000, what's to stop two $500,000 delegation decisions being made as opposed to $1 million one? If you know what I mean, how does it work in practicality?
Through the Mayor, so that would not be considered good practice. So we make sure that any contract awards or so you normally have a contract for significant values anyway, and we would be considering that to be invoice splitting, and we undertake reviews to ensure that that sort of process does not happen within our council.
Right.
Just may I add to that, Madam Mayor? Through Madam Mayor. So just to add to that, so yeah, that is called invoice splitting, which is a practice which is absolutely frowned upon and stamped out. So the way that the process also works too is, so a delegation comes from council to the Chief Executive, and then that flows down through myself to directors, then to managers, and then down. So this enables the effective processes to be run by providing, so as a result of that change, I would then review all the delegations that flow from that as well.
And through the Mayor, in addition, any large piece of work normally go through a tender process anyway. So so there's multiple different streams to the types of activities that we actually review. Particularly if you're looking at that $2 million, you're likely to be having a tender contract.
Councillor
Just another question through you, Madam Mayor. I'm still curious about the frequency of this being a barrier or a problem. How often has it been a case in the last year or two when the Chief Executive's had to bring that to the Hearings Committee or to another committee because it exceeded the 500,000? If anybody has any idea. Obviously there's an issue, there's a problem, and this is to solve it. How often has this problem occurred?
Through the Mayor. So John Kingsford will obviously be the best person to speak to, and he isn't available to be here today, and that's why we introduced this concept through the Audit and Risk Committee. But if council was wanting to get more information, we could do that. But again, I just confirm what Councillor Taylor was talking about. It's around the process thereof going forward. So,
Councillor McGrath.
I can introduce it in the discussion rather than debate. It's that this offers council is a gateway opportunity. Every time something like this has to come back to council or to a committee, it gives us a gateway. And over the last few years, we've had a lot of discussions about gateways for projects. And I would hate at this early stage and with a new council to lose those potential gateways. So just sort of throw that out there.
Question.
Councillor Mawson.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I guess on that note, excuse me, Councillor Bogue kind of asked my question as to the impact of how this would be for various, for the hearings committee. I mean, how many times would we be expecting them to meet, and what sort of impact that would be on the C's effectiveness to run his business?
I mean, as a member of the hearings committee, it would be on 6 hearings per annum. It's not significant. It's not a huge amount of time.
I was just going to add to that. It's about half a dozen times a year, which I can recall. There's probably a couple over the last few months, which it's been a thing. But it's more around the process, and that's what was discussed with Audit and Risk. It's about the process and delivering a plan.
So I will put the original motion that actually was presented to the Audit and Risk Committee, which is essentially the recommendation to increase the Chief Executive's financial delegation from 500,000 to 1 million. Do I have a mover?
I'll move it.
Councillor Taylor, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Price. All those, did you wish to speak to it any further? I think.
Yeah.
I'll just give Councillor Taylor an opportunity first as the mover of the motion.
No, I don't. Yeah, well, okay. I'm going to speak because if I said no, I'm not, and I do. So it's, I support the motion because, as I've said previously, it's about a process and it's about making efficiencies in making this operation, this huge operation of Napier City Council work effectively. Whether the hearings committee meets 6 times a year or whatever, they're just parts of the whole equation, because if a contract has gone to tender, then that tender has to be opened and has to be considered by the hearings committee. But there are lots of other expenses that don't go through a tender process, and so we have to make it available. Having, from a personal experience, in the businesses that I've been involved in, I've been given a delegated authority up to certain levels, and as the Chief Executive says, I then can delegate that down lower and for other people. And so it's not just about the delegation to the Chief Executive, it's about delegation to his senior leadership team and the other tiers of management of what they can spend without having to come and ask, is it all right? And we have the safeguard of having budgets that surround our things and our projects. So all those safeguards there, and to Councillor McGrath, we're not going to lose an opportunity for those pathways or those opportunities to question, because all the projects have to come back at some point in time for our approval. So I just think this is a good business practice. It was accepted by the 2 independent, experienced accountants on the Audit and Risk Committee, and I think their integrity should not be questioned. Thank you.
I'd just like to respond to that, because I've never questioned the integrity of the independent committee members on the Audit and Risk Committee. However, as professional accountants, they would not necessarily pass a political lens over a decision such as this, and they acknowledged my perspective around that. So again, this is around transparency and openness, and a delegation can actually be brought to us for review at any time. So I'm not saying never, I'm saying at this point in time, with regards to our community feeling around this demand for openness and transparency, that is why I'm not supporting this recommendation at this point in time. Councillor Brosnan.
Just a question of clarification. What motion is on the table?
The original motion, which was to increase the delegation, so it has been moved by Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Price. Thank you for reminding me of that.
Thank you.
And
Sorry.
I've just spoken against it.
Right. Actually, listening to discussion, I was intending to speak against the motion, not because I disagree with the $1 million value at all. I think that's, probably quite a practical number, but because, Council has already signalled a request to the Chief Executive to receive full financial delegations so that we could review. I think that for me this is almost piecemeal, that we're dealing with the one at the top and we're not sure what the flow-on effects of that are, which are completely legitimate, as Councillor Taylor has mentioned. But I'd like us to see the financial delegations and make a decision in one go about how those sort of react, and what, if we leave this position with $1 million, what does that mean for SLT? What does that mean for the layer underneath? So we have visibility across the levels of financial delegation, which I think is prudent. So I don't disagree necessarily with the dollar amount, and I don't disagree with any of the points of view that have been raised, but I would like to see us do it all in one go around those levels of financial delegation. So that's why I'd like to see it stay as it is for now, and leave the Chief Executive with the direction we've already given to receive those financial delegation lists so we can review it together. That's where I was sitting on this issue.
That's correct. Just to clarify on that, so there's only one delegation from Council, and that's to the Chief Executive.
I understand
So
Council can set
because
the
I'm-
delegations at any level.
Which is very unusual for a council to do. The way the Local Government Act is structured is that there's one delegation to the Chief Executive, and then that delegation flows, which is why it hasn't been brought through. So what's been brought through is the overview around the whole process and the delegations around that.
I personally have seen it done differently, and that's why I'd like to see and discuss the options in a full council meeting where we can see how that looks, and that may be your recommendations around how those financial delegations sit as they go down. Not down to a fine degree, but if we're looking at doubling that, then what does that mean for the next sort of two layers down? I think that's appropriate.
As I said, it's highly unusual, and we didn't interpret it that way. So if that's what's required, then we can certainly do that, but very, very unusual.
Yeah, Councillor Price.
I think we're talking about quite a small figure that is we're going to give a delegation to. I know $1 million sounds a lot, but we're in a multi-million-dollar business. Hastings is allowing $5 million. The EIT, which is nowhere near our size, is allowed $1 million. And as Councillor Taylor's outlined, it's not as if you can go and write a cheque out for $1 million. It's all budgeted and accounted for. So there's a lot of transparency there. And I really think John Kingsford could handle the whole $1 million himself to sign off with the work he's doing in infrastructure, and I'm sure Richard could too. But so I think we're talking about not a big figure, and we were accepted 500,000 10 years ago. So it was probably 10 million if you equivalent or rate it out. So, I mean, we've got to stay with the times a little bit. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to talk to the motion?
Yes.
Councillor Tapani.
Oh.
Yeah, I kind of have to go, but I was just going to say I agree in principle with moving it. I do feel like the timing's a little bit off, is my summary of my thoughts. So I've got to go. Thank you. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you.
Is that your
jacket?
Haley,
Oh,
jacket.
yes, I'll need that.
And your baby.
You've seen the winter forecast? It's worse than winter here.
Councillor Tapani.
Really good open discussion and clear points from everybody. I guess, as Councillor Price indicated, a 10-year-old delegation that hasn't been reviewed in itself suggests that we're behind the ball. I'm also conscious of the fact that now that we're live streaming, this robust conversation and all the detail that's been put before council is also now put before our public. And so there's an extra layer of openness and transparency that we didn't have prior to the appointment of this mayor and this council. So I think from my perspective, I was undecided before we started the discussion. I'm now speaking in favour of the recommendation as it lies, as moved and seconded. Acknowledging the concerns expressed by the mayor, I think for me we've achieved a level of openness and transparency just having this conversation in a live stream forum. The second thing is that I also quite like the suggestion of Deputy Mayor Brosnan. A greater and more comprehensive understanding of the nuances between delegation would be a welcome education for myself, and I would support a conversation along those lines. And my understanding is that as council we could probably call upon the Chief Executive and staff to provide that at any time. So I actually see that desire separate to the motion that's on the table, and I also see a level of openness and transparency through our live stream that wasn't there previously. So I'm speaking in favour of the motion. Our powers and our authorities and obligations haven't changed, so while I'm hearing concerns around gateways, I'm also aware that we've got proficient processes and layers of accountability, not only from the independent members of the panel, but the staff that are there and the processes that those decisions feed through. There's the overlying budgets on top of that. So there are layers of accountability and assurances that we can rely on. For me, I see this as a practical recommendation, given 10 years is quite a large span of time to not review a delegated authority in a $107 million operation. So I'm keen to support the motion. I will be vigilant around openness and transparency. I'm keen to have this conversation, as Deputy Mayor Brosnan has indicated. But overall, I think as a result of this conversation and bringing your concerns to the fore of this motion, Your Worship, we're able to put in place a good sense of openness and transparency around this conversation. So I speak in favour of the motion. Kia ora.
Councillor Bogue.
Yes, I speak against the motion, and I think what really pushed me was when Councillor Price said that $1 million, what's $1 million? That it's, to a lot of the people who'll be watching this today, $1 million, $500,000 is a huge amount of money, and I think it's important for us to be as transparent as we possibly can as far as our ratepayers are concerned. The public perception is that we're spending money willy-nilly and that they don't necessarily know about it or approve of it, and that is not a correct perception. But I just think that we should put the brakes on at this stage and make sure that the spending that is done in the public as much as possible, so that there isn't this public perception that we're spending their money without people knowing exactly where it's going. So I appreciate that we are trying to keep people informed, very informed about our budgets and our spending, but I just think at this stage in time, until we get more transparency in our processes, that I think it's healthy for us to stay at the $500,000 level rather than extend it.
Now, by my count, I think we've actually had 3 speak in support and 3 speak against. If there was anyone that had a real burning desire to speak to it, I'm happy to suspend Standing Order 20.6 to enable you to do that. Otherwise, you do? Yeah.
I do. Actually, and I'm not sure whether, through you, Madam Mayor, whether this is we're able to at this stage. I would actually like to see an amendment to the resolution, and are we able to do that procedurally? Now that we'd
have to vote on this one first.
Okay, right. So actually my amendment was more from a process perspective and around us setting a time frame for review of this, so that we don't perhaps find ourselves having to deal with consideration after a decade. So perhaps that it was put on an agenda every 3 years or something like that, to make sure that that component is sort of taken out of it in the future. That was just, yeah.
Just take that, yeah. Make a note of that as part of the work program. I will therefore put the
Excuse
motion.
me?
Those in,
Right
will
of
you right of
reply?
reply? Sorry, Councillor Taylor.
So, a couple of points I'd like to raise, and I concur, Councillor Bogue, $1 million is not an insignificant amount of money. But this city needs to continue to function, and we will spend considerable amounts of money, in excess of $1 million, on infrastructure, all of the things to make this city continue to function. And when we look at the prospective cost of the refuge introduction and the tender that is being or will come before us, for that to function, we're going to spend millions of dollars. So to make the city work and continue to function, we need to have the appropriate processes in place. I would also like to just remind us, we have one employee and we have one delegation. If we are successful in moving this, we give that delegation. The management that the CE puts in place and the processes under there is a management role. We are governors who have one role. We employ the chief executive, we give one delegation. We are not there to set the delegations below that place. Yes, we can be informed about it, but we do not set those delegations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I'll now put the motion in just so we're all clear on what it is. This is to approve the increase of the Chief Executive's financial delegation from 500,000 to 1 million, and we'll do this by a show of hands. All of those in favour, if you could please raise your hands. Getting tired.
Yep, thank you.
And against? And the motion is carried. Thank you. Next agenda item, reports under delegated authority. First up, we have the resource consents. If you want me to stop and do these separately, I will, if you've got any specific questions. Otherwise, I'll carry on to tenders let and documents executed under seal. Do I have a mover and seconder for these items? Councillor Price, Councillor Tapane. Does anyone wish to speak to them? All those in favour, I will put the motion of accepting. Please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, everybody, and we'll now move into public excluded. Do I have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Deputy Member Brosnan and Councillor Mawson. Did anyone want a 2-minute pit stop?
Yep.
Do we have lunch? I think there was lunch at one.